On the 9th day of the 9th month, the crown prince's grand wedding took place, symbolizing a long and enduring union for the newlyweds. The streets of the capital were adorned with red decorations for miles, and the glow of red candles illuminated half of the city, casting a radiant light over the entire general's mansion.
Did you hear? Emily, the general's daughter, is marrying the crown prince. She's so lucky, becoming the crown princess at such a young age.
Indeed, when the crown prince ascends the throne, she will be the empress of the great dynasty. No one can compare to her beauty and talent.
The noble women of the city were all envious of Emily for securing such a prestigious marriage. At the tender age of 16, she was to become the crown princess. The Henry family held military power, and every member of the family had illustrious military achievements. The crown prince was appointed heir at the age of 8 and fought on the battlefield at 12, turning the tide of the great dynasty, reclaiming lost territories, and expanding the borders. In just a few years, he brought the dynasty to its peak.
Heaven is merciful. The Holy Son has entered the court and will protect our great dynasty.
Look at him, in his splendid attire, riding that spirited horse. He's the dream of countless young maidens.
The crown prince and the legitimate daughter of the great general, Emily, were truly a match made in heaven. The noble women of the city watched the bridal sedan chair being carried into the crown prince's residence, twisting their handkerchiefs in envy.
Though we cannot compare to Emily, how wonderful it would be if I were Sophia, the second daughter of the Henry family. I could enter the crown prince's residence and become his consort.
This second daughter is truly fortunate. Though she is of lower birth, she can still marry the crown prince as a concubine. This is a blessing others can only dream of.
I heard that the second daughter was abandoned in the countryside to fend for herself since childhood. Who knows if she is still pure?
Exactly. How can a wild girl like her be worthy of the crown prince?
The voices outside the bridal sedan chair were incessant, but I paid them no mind. Because what they said was true. I was indeed the second daughter of the general's mansion, born to a concubine. After my mother passed away, I was sent to the countryside. I was coarse and grew up in the countryside, and for the past decade, no one knew of my existence. How did the crown prince come to know of me? And why did he bring me into his residence as well? Never mind. At this point, I can only take things one step at a time. On the day of the wedding, my legitimate sister and I entered the crown prince's residence on the same day. However, while my sister entered through the main gate and married the crown prince in a grand ceremony, I entered through a side gate and was directly sent to a side room. They said that Emily was legitimate, and I was not, so it should be this way. Being able to marry into the crown prince's residence was already a great favor from the emperor, a blessing accumulated over several lifetimes. But this blessing was not something I desired. The general's mansion held military power and was unmatched in the court. The crown prince was deeply loved by the people. The current emperor had just turned 40. Would he really be willing to hand over the still warm throne to someone else? The voices outside the bridal sedan chair were incessant, but I paid them no mind. Because what they said was true. I was indeed the second daughter of the general's mansion, born to a concubine. After my mother passed away, I was sent to the countryside. Thus, the officials and their families in the court all believed that the general's mansion had only one legitimate daughter. I was coarse and grew up in the countryside, and for the past decade, no one knew of my existence. How did the crown prince come to know of me? And why did he bring me into his residence as well? Never mind. At this point, I can only take things one step at a time. On the day of the wedding, my legitimate sister and I entered the crown prince's residence on the same day. However, while my sister entered through the main gate and married the crown prince in a grand ceremony, I entered through a side gate and was directly sent to a side room.
We are all servants of the general's residence. Others get to serve the crown prince's main wife, while I can only serve a country girl. You are at least the second daughter of the general's residence, yet all you do is eat and eat, without any ambition or fight.
Since I was brought back to the general's residence, I have heard such words countless times. I am used to it. After Mother died, Aunt Margaret sent me to the countryside. I was only 6 years old, naive and confused, holding Mother's hairpin at night and missing her. The nannies and servants in the countryside mocked and ridiculed me, and my meals were often leftovers. I dared not speak out and could only swallow the bitterness. When I was 10, I grew more and more beautiful, blossoming into a graceful young lady. The only kind nanny, Nanny Martha, passed away the year before last, leaving only a few servants in the countryside. Most of them had no indenture contracts and were punished and sent here by the general's residence. Some older men, who had never experienced a woman's touch, saw that the general's residence did not care about my well-being and knew I was an abandoned daughter. They set their sights on me. The first to break into my room was the steward, over 40, with a large belly and a strong odor. Resisting him was like an ant trying to stop a cart, so I lured him into playing a game and unexpectedly stabbed his artery with Mother's hairpin. Blood splattered everywhere, especially on my face, like red plum blossoms blooming in the snow. I dragged his body to the courtyard and warned everyone. I still remember the look in the servants' eyes, as if they were seeing a demon. I did not blame them. Fear of death is human nature. I did it to set an example and deter others. Even so, I found a dagger and kept it with me day and night.
In the countryside, I worked hard every day to earn some silver. Now, married into the Crown Prince's residence, I have fine food and a monthly allowance. Isn't that wonderful?
Don't wait anymore. The Crown Prince won't come. Even the eunuchs in the palace wouldn't want a country girl like you. How dare you dream of the Crown Prince? Our young lady, Olivia, is virtuous and talented, with beauty that can topple a kingdom. She will surely be favored by the Crown Prince, while you will be trapped in this deep palace forever.
I did not blame Grace for hating me. When Madame Clara asked me to choose a maid, Grace was the only one who looked at me with the most disdain, so I chose her. I just smiled and continued playing with the tassel on my head. It was beautiful but too cumbersome, just like this Crown Prince's residence. Grace was right. I was just an extra gift with the Crown Prince's marriage. How could I expect his favor? I only hoped to one day escape these high walls and regain my freedom. Seeing my carefree attitude, Grace became even more furious and went to sleep in the side room. As the breeze brushed the window and the candlelight flickered, I felt sleepy too. I was about to close the window and sleep when the Crown Prince, reeking of alcohol, finally arrived. The Crown Prince, with his high status and natural talent, had a cold demeanor but a pair of affectionate eyes. I found myself somewhat entranced. Such a handsome man, I had never seen anyone so striking. But, why did the Crown Prince look somewhat familiar?
I haven't arrived yet, and you dared to lift your veil.
The Crown Prince lifted my chin, a smile playing on his lips. I apologize for my rudeness, Your Highness. I bowed and saluted the Crown Prince. Your Highness, it is an honor for me that you came to see me. However, I believe that on the wedding night, you should be with the Crown Princess. Though I grew up in the countryside, I knew the rules. On the wedding night, the Crown Prince staying in a concubine's room was inappropriate and not good for me. I wanted to live peacefully in this deep palace, without drawing too much attention.
If it were anyone else, they would have welcomed me in. Why don't you?
I dare not. The Crown Prince's handsome face turned cold, his voice carrying an undeniable authority.
What if I insist on staying here?
The voices outside the bridal sedan chair were incessant, but I paid them no mind.
Exactly. How can a wild girl like her be worthy of the Crown Prince?
Because what they said was true. I was indeed the second daughter of the general's mansion, born to a concubine. After my mother passed away, I was sent to the countryside. Thus, the officials and their families in the court all believed that the general's mansion had only one legitimate daughter.
I was coarse and grew up in the countryside, and for the past decade, no one knew of my existence. How did the crown prince come to know of me? And why did he bring me into his residence as well? Never mind. At this point, I can only take things one step at a time.
On the day of the wedding, my legitimate sister and I entered the crown prince's residence on the same day. However, while my sister entered through the main gate and married the crown prince in a grand ceremony, I entered through a side gate and was directly sent to a side room.
Emily was legitimate and you are not, so it should be this way. Being able to marry into the crown prince's residence is already a great favor from the emperor, a blessing accumulated over several lifetimes.
But this blessing was not something I desired.
The general's mansion held military power and was unmatched in the court. The crown prince was deeply loved by the people. The current emperor had just turned 40. Would he really be willing to hand over the still warm throne to someone else? I was probably the first concubine to be sent to the cold palace right after entering the residence. The Orchid Pavilion was remote and quiet, with only Grace and me. Grace had high ambitions and always left me alone to sneak out, leaving just me and a stray cat for company. The days were bearable, except for one strange habit of the crown prince.
Why does he stay with me every night, holding my waist and indulging in pleasure, only to kick me before leaving? A dignified crown prince with such a peculiar habit.
Not long after, news came that Grace had become the crown prince's concubine. It was said she was the lost daughter of a marquis family, found by the crown prince. For a time, she was in the limelight, even surpassing Emily. The crown prince stayed in my room every night, so who was favoring Grace?
What is the crown prince up to?
The general's mansion had high hopes for Emily, and the crown prince's favor for Grace made Emily's position precarious. The marquis family and the general's mansion had always been at odds. The crown prince was indeed capable, using just 2 concubines to control both families. But what did that have to do with me, a mere concubine? Grace was indeed impatient, coming to mock me on the 3rd day of being conferred as a concubine.
Seeing the concubine, why don't you kneel quickly?
Behind Grace stood a maid, as arrogant as she was.
This concubine greets the concubine. What brings you here?
My humble attitude could not stop her from doing what she wanted.
A lowly concubine dares to talk back to me. Someone, give her 30 lashes.
Grace personally supervised the punishment. The board was heavy. The pain made my tears fall, but I bit my lip and did not make a sound. Grace walked up to me, looking at the blood-soaked gauze, very satisfied.
Isabella, did you not expect that even I could climb over your head? I have to thank you for my current position. If you hadn't picked me out back then, I wouldn't have had the chance to meet the crown prince, and I wouldn't have become his concubine.
My consciousness was almost blurred by the pain, and she was still shouting in my ear, boasting about the crown prince's favor for her.
The crown prince even helped me choose the marquis family as my backing to make my position legitimate.
I closed my eyes, not wanting to listen to her rambling. Fool. What a brainless fool. No one cared if Grace was the marquis's daughter. The emperor and the crown prince wanted to control the courtiers and balance the forces.
Someone, don't let her die.
A basin of cold water mixed with salt was poured over my head. The pain instantly spread to every part of my body. Grace laughed and instructed the maid.
Isabella is from the countryside and doesn't know the rules. To avoid offending the nobles, I will personally teach her until she learns.
Emily, who somehow got the news, rushed over. Seeing me covered in blood and barely breathing, her eyes filled with tears, full of heartache.
Second sister, how are you?
Emily squatted in front of me, wanting to touch me, but withdrew her hand halfway.
It's nothing serious, I just can't get up to greet you. Please don't blame me, Crown Princess.
Second sister, what are you saying?
Emily comforted me a few words, then turned to the instigator.
Greetings, Crown Princess.
Grace pretended to kneel and greet. Emily did not tell her to rise. Her beautiful face was full of anger as she stared at Grace.
What is the concubine doing?
One word, concubine, distinguished their ranks. The Crown Prince's wife was only one person, Emily, and everyone else was just concubines.
The Crown Prince punished Isabella to be confined here. I don't know what Isabella did to displease the concubine.
If my body didn't hurt so much, I would have jumped up and shouted, "What does your power struggle have to do with me? Can't you let me go back to my room to apply medicine first?"
Sister, you misunderstand. I served Isabella and know her temperament, reckless and rude. I thought, although I am the Marquis's daughter, the General's mansion has treated me well. If Isabella speaks rudely and offends the Crown Prince, the ones who will suffer are you and the General's mansion. So I took it upon myself to teach Isabella etiquette and rules.
Grace's mouth was indeed eloquent. Although I hadn't served the Crown Prince, Grace had seen the blood-stained white wedding cloth with her own eyes.
Concubine, please be careful with your words.
Emily's face was ugly, giving me a cold look as a warning. I was beaten to the point of being covered in wounds, gasping in pain. About a quarter of an hour later, their confrontation ended with Emily fainting. I was carried into the house, my clothes and the blood sticking to my torn skin. The doctor treated my wounds, and I felt like I was going through torture again. At night, I developed a high fever, and in a daze, I saw a man feeding me medicine.
Don't be afraid. It will be over soon.
Don't be afraid? What was I afraid of? I was only afraid that this deep palace would trap me for life. There is good news in the Crown Prince's residence. After Emily fainted, the imperial physician diagnosed her with a pregnancy. Coincidentally, not long after, Grace was also diagnosed with a pregnancy. The Crown Prince was overjoyed, rewarding all the palaces, and even I benefited from their good fortune, being released from confinement and moving out of the secluded Orchid residence back to my own chamber. The Crown Prince even generously allowed me to choose 2 maids for myself. They were newly entered maids, Lily and Clara. One was lively and active, the other quiet and meticulous. I was very satisfied. But those who do not plan for the future will have immediate worries. At this moment, just a few days of comfort had passed, and I was staring at the Crown Prince who had come in the middle of the night. In the Crown Prince's residence, there were only the 3 of us as wives and concubines. Now that Emily and Grace were both expecting, I was the only one left to serve in the bedchamber.
Your Highness, I have my monthly cycle, I'm afraid I cannot serve tonight.
The Crown Prince held my waist and sat me on his lap, his broad, calloused hand gently pinching my increasingly plump cheeks.
No matter. Do not call me Your Highness, it is too distant. My name is Alexander, you can call me Alexander.
Indeed, it felt distant. Every time I saw the Crown Prince, it was at night, and every emotional exchange was on the bed.
Alex. Alexander, my name is Isabella.
Reciprocating courtesy, I also told him my name.
Isabella.
He called my name, murmuring softly, stirring my heart. I dared not look into Alexander's eyes, those affectionate eyes were too scorching. All night, Alexander did not force me to serve him, he just held me. The next morning, Lily came with a clean white handkerchief, looking worried. After all, it was the first time the Crown Prince had summoned me to serve him, and this white handkerchief was to be presented to the Crown Princess.
I lied about having my monthly cycle last night. The crown prince did not touch me. Tell the crown princess that I had my monthly cycle and did not consummate last night.
Whether it was Emily or Grace, they did not want me to serve the crown prince. My face was not as delicate as Emily's, nor as sharp as Grace's, but more like an alluring enchantress, cold and seductive, captivating with just a glance. Lily nodded and conveyed the white handkerchief and my words to Nanny Martha. I summoned Clara and handed her a piece of paper. Clara understood and found an opportunity to leave the residence. As I expected, the clean white handkerchief still brought trouble for me. Emily and Grace were both holding their slightly swollen bellies. The crown prince sat at the desk, coldly looking at me kneeling on the ground. In front of me were two white handkerchiefs. One was the blood-stained wedding handkerchief from the wedding night, the other was the clean white handkerchief from last night. The comparison was clear.
Your Highness, Crown Princess, Grace is young and inexperienced, so she made a mistake. This matter has kept me awake all night, troubled and uneasy. After much hesitation, I decided to speak out. On the wedding day, everyone in the residence knew the Crown Prince stayed in the Crown Princess's room. Near midnight, Isabella told me to rest first. The next morning, when I went to help Isabella wash and dress, I found this blood-stained wedding handkerchief and the disheveled wedding bed. I wanted to report this to the Crown Prince and Crown Princess immediately, but Isabella threatened me, saying she would harm me if I exposed it. At that time, I was just a small maid, and to save my life, I had to keep it a secret.
Grace, looking repentant, cried bitterly. Emily had someone help her up from the ground.
Side concubine is pregnant. No need to kneel. Sit and speak.
Grace chose the right time. Now that she was carrying a royal child, even if she committed the crime of deceiving the emperor, she could still be safe. What a good plan! Not only did she get rid of me, but she also saved her life. But what role did Emily play in this matter?
Sister Isabella, do you have anything to explain?
Emily looked sorrowful, but I did not miss the flash of triumph in her eyes. It seemed they had planned this together. I did not answer her, but looked past them at the crown prince sitting in the main seat. He knew the whole truth. I was very curious, what role did the crown prince play in this?
Since she has been involved with someone else, send her to the military camp to serve as a comfort woman.
Then he turned to Emily, comforting her.
Emily, don't worry. She was originally from the countryside. Today, I will clean up the family on behalf of my father-in-law. I will personally issue a decree to demote her to a servant, and it will not affect the general's residence at all.
Whether it was the crime of deceiving the emperor or the crime of promiscuity, both were capital offenses. Demoting me to a servant was already a mercy. I looked at the man on the high platform, hiding the myriad emotions in my eyes, and bowed in thanks.
Thank you, Your Highness, for sparing my life.
The voices outside the bridal sedan chair were incessant, but I paid them no mind.
Exactly. How can a wild girl like her be worthy of the crown prince?
Because what they said was true. I was indeed the second daughter of the general's mansion, born to a concubine. After my mother passed away, I was sent to the countryside. Thus, the officials and their families in the court all believed that the general's mansion had only one legitimate daughter. I was coarse and grew up in the countryside, and for the past decade, no one knew of my existence. How did the crown prince come to know of me? And why did he bring me into his residence as well? Never mind. At this point, I can only take things one step at a time. Lily and I were put into a prison cart and taken north. The guards looked at us with greedy eyes.
Miss, what should we do?
Don't be afraid, it will be over soon.
Patted her hand to comfort her.
In a flash, we had been traveling for several months. The guards escorting us knew I was a military courtesan but did not touch me at all. Sometimes I wondered if Grace's money was insufficient. The scenery of the northern frontier was indeed as famous as they said. The setting sun cast a slanting light on my shoulders, dyeing my dark hair red. It was still the same as before, the wind and sand were strong but exhilarating, free and unrestrained. Lily had a strong aversion to the northern frontier and often frowned. If sand got into the food, she would refuse to eat out of spite.
Miss, the guards hunted a wild boar. I exchanged some silver for this bowl of soup. Please drink it. You've lost weight these days.
I took the meat soup, poured half into Lily's bowl, and said, "Let's drink together."
Miss, я могу servant. This bowl of meat soup is too precious. Lily cannot drink it.
I smiled, looking at Lily's lips cracked from the wind and sand.
Lily, are you reluctant to drink this soup, or are you afraid to drink it?
In the past, on the estate, I had hunted wild boars and cooked meat soup, which was fresh but had a gamey taste. But this bowl of soup was purely fragrant and sweet, with a hint of medicinal aroma. Lily, oh Lily. Lily's eyes darkened, and she wanted to explain something, but then we heard the sound of swords clashing in the distance.
Assassins, form up.
Amidst the flashing swords and fierce fighting, the wind and sand blinded our eyes, and blood stained the desert red. The guards were quickly defeated.
Miss, are they here to kill us?
Do you not know the answer? I suddenly turned and grabbed Lily's hand, which was holding a knife to stab me.
I sneered, forcefully knocking the dagger away, then pinned her to the ground, immobilizing her. Lily, you were too impatient. Truly loyal to your master until the end, aren't you?
Miss, we are late.
They tied Lily up.
When did you find out?
Perhaps when you gave the white handkerchief to Nanny Martha, or maybe when you insisted on following me, or when you asked about Clara's whereabouts. Lily, pretense is just pretense, especially true feelings, which cannot be faked.
You knew that the reason it was a white handkerchief that night was because I never spent the night with him. If Grace knew I didn't spend the night, how could she have foolishly reported me? I guess the last task Olivia gave you was to end my life if I tried to escape on the way. If I didn't escape and successfully became a military courtesan, you were to keep a close watch on me to prevent me from rising again. Am I right?
But you couldn't endure the hardships of the northern frontier and wanted to end my life early. When you reported back to Olivia, you could just say I tried to escape and you killed me, thus completing your task. Lily thought I was a foolish country girl. But she didn't know that a country girl needed to work harder than others to survive in adversity.
Everyone says you are foolish and incompetent, but now it seems it was all a facade. You have been pretending and deceiving everyone from the start. Grace becoming a concubine was no accident, and the 2 handkerchiefs were no coincidence either. You calculated step by step to get yourself out of the Crown Prince's residence and the General's residence. What exactly are you after?
I still smiled and handed her a cup of poisoned wine.
Lily, if your master could die as peacefully as you, it would be her blessing too.
Lily wanted to say something, but I had Clara pour the meat soup into her mouth. The poison took effect quickly, and Lily soon passed away.
I looked at Lily's body and said to Clara, "Bury her."
The voices outside the bridal sedan chair were incessant, but I paid them no mind. After all, what they said was true. I was the second daughter of the general's mansion, born to a concubine. After my mother passed away, I was sent to the countryside. Thus, the officials and their families in the court all believed that the general's mansion had only one legitimate daughter. On the day of the wedding, my legitimate sister and I entered the Crown Prince's residence on the same day. However, while my sister entered through the main gate and married the Crown Prince in a grand ceremony, I entered through a side gate and was directly sent to a side room.
How can a wild girl like you be worthy of the Crown Prince?
They said that Emily was legitimate, and I was not, so it should be this way. Being able to marry into the Crown Prince's residence was already a great favor from the Emperor, a blessing accumulated over several lifetimes. But this blessing was not something I desired. The general's mansion held military power and was unmatched in the court. The crown prince was deeply loved by the people. The current emperor had just turned 40. Would he really be willing to hand over the still warm throne to someone else? Henry, in a desperate bid for survival before the entire family was executed, revealed my true identity. The current emperor sent the crown prince to hunt me down. After several days apart, I met the crown prince again on the battlefield at the border. He was still the same dashing young man, but I was no longer the humble concubine of the crown prince's residence. The border between the two countries was tense, with frequent small-scale skirmishes. At night, after discussing strategies with the generals, I returned to my tent, only to fall into the strong embrace of a man as soon as I entered.
Isabella.
The man's whisper was as gentle as the first time he called my name.
Prince Alexander, aren't you afraid I'll harm you for coming into my camp alone?
Over the years, the northern frontier had quietly grown stronger, no longer the easy target it once was. Though the great dynasty was powerful, it largely relied on the current emperor's capable son. The internal strife between the general's residence and the marquis's residence had left the great dynasty with no one else as capable as Alexander. If Alexander were eliminated, the people of the northern frontier could live in peace for 100 years. He held me tightly, his large, calloused hand gently caressing my slightly rounded belly. After leaving the general's residence, I discovered I was pregnant. Despite the hardships, this child was incredibly resilient. Bowl after bowl of herbal concoctions meant to end the pregnancy were sent to my tent, but when I felt the pulse on my wrist, I couldn't bring myself to do it.
In war, casualties are inevitable, but innocent children, especially unborn ones, should not suffer. However, he would be like me, born without a father.
Isabella, I will fulfill your wish.
His voice was deep, and his affectionate eyes were even more intense.
Isabella, if we could share the snow, it would be a lifetime together. But unfortunately, neither the northern frontier nor the great dynasty has snow.
I couldn't bear to look at him and had to turn my eyes away. If not for our opposing positions, I think I would have liked that dashing young man with a long spear on the battlefield. But sadly, his spear was aimed at my people, and his achievements were built on their blood. We were destined not to walk the same path. That night, Alexander just held me in silence. War was imminent. I personally led the battlefield against the great Chao kingdom. Blood stained the earth, and under the setting sun, all I could see was devastation.
Princess, be careful.
Clara noticed the incoming arrows, but it was too late. I dismounted, dodging 2 arrows, but didn't notice another arrow behind me. The arrow approached, but the expected pain didn't come. A man holding a long spear blocked the arrow with his body.
Your Highness.
I held Alexander tightly, a tear sliding down my cheek.
Alexander, I'd rather you die in battle than die saving me. Alexander, wake up, let's fight properly with real weapons.
On the 3rd day, the crown prince of the great Chao kingdom, Alexander, died in battle, his body never found. The great Chao kingdom was defeated at the border and retreated south to defend the Jia Pass. The emperor of the great Chao kingdom sent envoys to negotiate peace, offering annual tributes, a princess for marriage, and a prince as a hostage to the northern border, hoping for a truce and alliance.
Dear child, grandfather will give you the entire northern border. Will you become the new ruler of the north?
Grandfather, I love freedom and don't want to be confined to the court and palace. Please grant my wish.
The joy of becoming a mother for the first time had overshadowed the sadness hidden in my heart. Grandfather finally agreed to my request, allowing me to seek freedom. I carried my luggage northward until I reached a snow-covered countryside where I found a small cottage to settle down. In the snow in front of the cottage lay a man covered in blood, his black hair hidden by the falling snow. I kicked him, rolling him a few times in the snow, then dragged him back to the thatched cottage. 4 months later, I gave birth to a baby boy named Lucas.